Okay, let me get that out of the way. And I did just pull up the chat screen, so if you guys want to, I think I'll be able to see it when I share my PowerPoint. So you guys can ask questions in chat, or if you raise your hand, then Jack can slow me down and ask questions. I
Okay.
think a lot of your
Yeah,
names.
if you miss them, I'll catch the chat.
Okay, a lot of your names and faces are familiar, but for those of you that didn't meet me the last couple sessions, my name is Deanna Hatch. I am the nutritional health coach at Natural Grocers here in Lawrence, and my job is everything education. Classes like this, I do classes here in the store. I do also one-on-one coaching sessions with people where, let's say someone learns they're diabetic and they need to improve their diet, that sort of thing. So I can meet with them about that. I can do store tours. If somebody wants to go gluten-free, I can show them, things in the store they may not know where they are. All of those things are free of charge. It's something that the Natural Grocers chain has at most of the stores. They have someone like me. Real quickly, my background, I have a PhD in a field called pharmacognosy, which is the study of the chemistry of a natural product that gives it some biological action. So I spent lots of years on the manufacturing side of supplements. So that's what qualifies me to be able to tell you about supplements and herbs and nutrition. A lot of the other nutritional health coaches are officially nutritionists. So I'm kind of coming at it a little bit from the back door. Anyway, looks like we've got enough folks to get started. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and let's see that one. Okay, hopefully you all are seeing the title screen that says cravings, weight gain, and the roller coaster. Let's see, I can get rid of all this other stuff, sorry. So I can't seem to get this thing to go full screen without losing you guys. So hopefully this is a good enough screen that you can all see it. We experimented last time and this was just the best we could do. So anyway, and also just another quick thing is for those of you that attended the Health Span talk, you're going to see a lot of overlap here because we're going to be talking again a lot about the blood sugar roller coaster. And I actually end up talking a lot about blood sugar because it plays such a role in inflammation, in the, keeping your insulin levels and your blood sugar balanced just makes a huge difference for the health of your body, including weight and cravings and that sort of thing, which we'll more specifically talk about today. Okay, so is there everybody's okay at this point seeing the screen and we're ready to go, I'm presuming. Okay. Oops, it's not going, hold on. Yeah. Hold on, for some reason it's not changing slides on me. Huh. Oh, there it went. Okay, so I have to give a couple quick disclaimers, you guys. This program is not intended to diagnose or mitigate diseases. What we're doing is considered education. Supplements in general cannot be equated to drug actions. We have to talk about how they improve the health of the body and not fixing a problem. Also, just a reminder that some things can interact with pharmaceuticals. If you have a concern, I usually tell people to talk to their pharmacist. They usually tend to have better knowledge of interactions than their doctors do. Just some Natural Grocers was founded based on these principles, education being number one. That's why most stores have a nutritional health. Somebody's got their microphone on, so if you guys would mute, I'm just hearing an echo.
I got it. I got it taken care of.
Thank you. Okay, so you guys, this is probably not, there's always a little gloom and doom at the beginning, I'm afraid, when we talk about why we want to make these changes. there's a little bit of discussion about the negative aspects of health in our diet. And as you can see, starting in about 1980, we were exponentially we were still going up a little bit in calorie intake and obesity, but in 1980, all of a sudden, we really jumped in the percentage of people that are obese or very obese really climbed. And so one of the things we're going to talk about is what happened in 1980. So in 1980, there was a lot of heart disease, and the government was frantic to want to slow heart disease. And they got a little premature and made some guidelines based on early data, and they chose to make low-fat diets be the strategy they used to try and prevent heart disease. So they made fat and saturated fats really bad, and they made us all afraid, and we all went on low-fat diets, and we're afraid of butter and all those things. And as you can see from just this graph alone, that dietary recommendation did not solve the problem in terms of health in America. In fact, I'd like to make the argument that it exacerbated it. And a lot of what we'll talk about again today is blood sugar and managing blood sugar. And what happens with these low-fat diets is you substitute fat with carbohydrates. So if you pick up a low-fat cookie, in order for it to taste good, it's probably got more sugar than a regular cookie, or if you pick up, and the other thing about low fat, which we'll talk about also, is fat is very satiating. You don't keep craving other foods. It's very satisfying. You feel done, you feel full, you feel, like you're complete eating. Carbohydrates are not like that. Carbohydrates, the more you eat, the more you want. And I don't know if you've noticed that if you eat a pizza, you eat a lot more pizza than you would if you ate just, a steak and vegetables. There's just something about carbohydrates, which we're going to be talking about, that do not lend themselves well to being a weight loss strategy. Okay, so this is just a quick thing that changed from 1960s. This first one, for those of you that can't read it, this says butter and eggs. So butter and eggs, the consumption in America is way down. Grains consumption in America is way up. The sugar is really way up. And that's, as I said, a lot of what they did strategically to reduce fat was substitute sugar and grains. Okay, so now we're going to so the overview of this presentation is we're going to talk a lot about blood sugar and the carbohydrates that lead to blood sugar issues and why it matters. And then that's going to help us understand about why that matters for weight and why that matters for the cravings for eating a lot of food. I don't know about you guys, but I can really crave some ice cream sometimes. And so we'll talk a little bit about why sometimes I'll have such heavy craving for ice cream and other times I'm fine without it. So you'll kind of learn the science behind what causes those cravings. Anyway, so blood sugar, in your bloodstream right now at any given time, there's a little bit of a sugar called glucose. And when your doctor measures your blood sugar, they're measuring the amount of glucose in your blood sugar. And a little bit is normal. You want your cells in your brain, your liver, all the cells in your body can use glucose as a source of energy to help your brains think, help your liver detox, all those things. So glucose is used by the body. The body can also use other things for energy. It can use certain kinds of fats. But sugar in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's a quantity thing, quality and quantity, which we'll talk about. Anyway, so I'm going to jump on to the next screen and we'll talk about why insulin and blood sugar affect your health and your cravings and your weight. Okay, so just kind of simply stated, carbohydrates there's three kinds of macronutrients. There's fats, proteins, and carbohydrates. And then we have micronutrients. Those are the vitamins and the phytonutrients and the minerals, kind of the things that are smaller. The macronutrients are carbohydrates is one of those. And carbohydrates, when you eat bread, crackers, soda pop, a sweet potato, things that we think of as starchy or sweet, those break down to sugars in your digestive system. They get absorbed in your bloodstream, and you get sugar in your bloodstream. And again, a little's all right, but a lot's not so good. The other kind of sugar we'll talk about briefly is fructose. That's the sugar that's in fruit. So anyway, when you measure your blood sugar, you're measuring how much glucose, which is what carbohydrates break down to. Sorry, you guys. So we're going to talk about these two hormones, or three hormones, and how they affect your blood sugar. You've all heard of insulin, I'm sure. So insulin's job has two main jobs. One is to get the sugar into the cells of your body and help get it through it so the cell can use that sugar for energy. The other thing insulin does is it helps monitor the amount of sugar that's floating in your bloodstream and keep it within that window of a healthy range. So its job is to reduce blood sugar when there's too much sugar in the bloodstream. Cortisol and glucagon, those are two other hormones, and their job actually is counter. These guys are yin and yang to each other. So cortisol wants to get the blood sugar up when it's needed. And one of the things that's interesting about cortisol, you guys may already know this, but cortisol is the hormone that's active when we're stressed or when we're trying to outrun the alligator. Cortisol pumps sugar into the bloodstream so that your muscles have plenty of sugar to run fast and climb a tree or do whatever you need to do. So cortisol is a stress hormone. So when you're under stress, your body is going to do different things to try and raise the blood sugar level. And that's part of why we tend to stress eat. Why a lot of people gained weight during the pandemic because we stress ate. We were upset, we were worried, we were bored, all those different things. And so a lot of people ended up gaining weight during the pandemic. And part of that was these hormones pumping through our body, telling us that we needed more sugar. Alrighty, let's see. Okay, so for those of you that don't love heavy science, you can sleep through this slide. This is probably one of those slides that is entirely essential, but this is for people that really love the heavy science. So these three hormones, epinephrine, glucagon, and cortisol, they're all three what we call stress hormones. And so this is just a little bit deeper dive on what I was just saying, that the stress hormones mess with our blood sugar. That's kind of the basic thing to say. But so as you can see, all three of them have different ways in which they increase the blood sugar. The epinephrine takes proteins from our bodies and breaks them down to these amino acids, which can be used to create sugars. So in other words, if your stress is high all the time, you might actually be reducing your muscle mass by constantly trying to, your body thinks it needs sugar. So it's breaking down muscles to give your body a source of sugar, and glucagon actually activates the liver to make sugar. And it suppresses insulin output, which means that your blood sugar is going to stay higher because it's not telling it to stop. It's not putting out insulin, which insulin should tell it to stop. And then cortisol decreases the sensitivity to insulin a little, kind of like we've talked about with insulin resistance, where the cells become less able to let the sugar in. Cortisol over time has that same sort of effect where it kind of like creates an insulin resistance of sorts. So when we talk about health and weight loss and weight, managing our weight and longevity, stress, I don't feel like in America or in general, doctors, I don't feel like they talking about stress enough. I feel like we need to talk more about managing stress and more about ways to keep this hormone down, and you can see why. Okay, so now we're going to kind of talk about the foods and how they play a role in blood sugar, and then eventually we're going to talk about how to manage all of this. So throughout human history, as you can imagine, scarcity was more common than abundance. We live in an amazing time right now, even though there's a lot of difficulty about it. The fact that we can run to the grocery store, Jack and I were just talking before we started this about cucumbers. So Jack, I hope you don't mind me saying this, his cucumber crop failed in this heat, but he's okay. He can go to the grocery store and he can buy cucumbers. But 100 years ago, he might have not been a very happy camper if his cucumbers had failed, or if he had lived in a place where he was a hunter-gatherer and a certain crop that he depended on failed, he wouldn't have been so lucky. So we live in an amazing time as far as access to food, and an amazing place. There are parts of the world that are still struggling, but here in America, for the most part, a lot of us are not starving to death. Okay, anyway, so meals that we're going to be talking a lot about this, so I'm just going to really quickly go over this. Meals that raise your blood sugar quickly. This is kind of obvious. Lots of carbohydrates are going to raise your blood sugar. Some are worse than others. Obviously, you probably could imagine a soda pop's going to raise your blood sugar a lot faster than a sweet potato. But they're both considered carbohydrates. They're both going to break down in your bloodstream, or break down in your digestive system to put sugar into your bloodstream. So when we talk about managing carbohydrates, we're talking quantity and quality. It's both. You could eat 3 pounds of brown rice and you're still going to throw your blood sugar off, even though brown rice is a complex carb and it's going to break down slower than a soda pop would. It's still quantity and quality and your own body's ability to manage the sugars. So there's 3 things at play there. I hope that made sense to you guys. Oh, one of the things I wanted to point out on this slide, notice it says fat-free dairy. How many, I won't ask you to raise your hands, but a lot of us from my generation believe they need to have fat-free dairy because it's been drilled into our heads that fat-free dairy is better. It's lower calories, and some people do need a little bit lower fat. They don't manage fats as well because their bile or their gallbladder is not working that great. But in general, fat-free dairy, because they've taken the fat out of there, it spikes your blood sugar a lot faster than if you have a 2% or a full fat dairy. And that's kind of an interesting thing to think about, isn't it? That anyway, I'm going to show you a slide here in a minute that has a graph on it. We'll go a little more into the importance of fat and fiber and protein and other things in managing your carbohydrates. But I just wanted to point this out right here that low fat or fat-free dairy actually is a high glycemic food. Okay, so here's kind of a graph that begins to talk a little bit about spiking our blood sugar, what it looks like. And I sent you, I don't know, I think Jack, when he sent out the Zoom invitation, he included a blood sugar roller coaster. It doesn't look like this, but it's kind of the same information. So these 2 lines here indicate a normal healthy blood sugar. And so when we eat something, let's say cold cereal, skim milk, orange juice for breakfast, which is what I bet 90% of Americans eat, or an oatmeal with orange juice or something like that. Um, what we're doing, because there's not much protein here, there's not much fat, it's almost all carbohydrates. What happens is the blood sugar gets higher than it's supposed to, higher than that healthy range that we want. So insulin has to do its job to bring it back down. Whenever our blood sugar gets outside of the normal, either high or low, it's very stressful on the body. High blood sugar and high insulin levels actually are very inflammatory and can cause a lot of damage to the body, can accelerate aging, can cause some of the damage to the arteries that we talk about when we talk about heart disease. There's a lot of things about this elevated blood sugar that play a role directly and indirectly in our overall health. And I think we did talk about that when we were talking about health span. Anyway, so our goal is to keep our blood sugar in this normal range. Uh, Sometimes when our blood sugar gets really high and insulin's worked really hard, we actually get kind of a crash. And that's this low blood sugar down here. And a lot of us have experienced that mid-morning crash where we ate pancakes for breakfast and then 10 o'clock in the morning we're reaching in our drawer for the candy bar or the sweet coffee or something like that. So I went through that rather quickly, and if that isn't making sense, please ask some questions, okay? Okay, so here's more about how meals affect blood sugar. Okay, so we want to aim for a steady, we want to do our best to keep our blood sugar in that healthy range and thereby prevent inflammation due to food and those two hormones, the cortisol and the insulin. Okay, so notice it says protein and fat uh, have have minimal, if any, impacts on blood sugar. So protein can be converted to sugar in the bloodstream, but it's not instant like a carbohydrate. In general, proteins get used for enzymes and muscles and neurotransmitters that communicate in the brain. And fats can be used for energy. They're used for creating different hormones in the body. But in general, protein and fats don't impact the blood sugar at all. So you can kind of get where I'm going here. I am not personally a huge fan of the keto diet. I'm not saying go on keto diet and eat no carbohydrates. I don't think everybody's bodies are designed for that. Some people do really well on the keto diet, but I don't think it's for everybody. What we're kind of aiming for here is finding your sweet spot. What amount of carbohydrates works for your body, that your body's not going to have inflammation, it's not going to have the cravings, it's not going to gain weight, maybe even help you lose weight if you need to. There's a spot that works well for everybody. But the strategy for reducing your carbohydrate intake is to think about protein, fat, and fiber. I don't know why they don't say fiber on here. I guess they do a little bit here, but fiber, protein, fat, and fiber are what you focus on if you're wanting to uh, manage your blood sugar. And then the carbs are kind of like a bonus optional thing. So when you're designing your meals, I believe we've got a slide coming up on the shows the meal wheel. When you're designing your meals, you want to mostly focus on those things that don't affect your blood sugar. So you want to focus on protein and vegetables and maybe a little healthy fat and things like that. And then the carbs are sort of fluff on your plate. They're not the focus. A lot of us, put a big blob of pasta and then we put sauce on it, but it needs to be kind of the other way. It's a big blob of sauce and a little bit of pasta, if that makes sense. All right. So anyway, there's some interesting studies. There's a book called Blue. I don't know if it's a book, but a lot of people talk about blue zones, and there's zones where people live a long time. A lot of folks over 100 years old, and in those blue zones, in a lot of sort of old hunter-gatherer traditions, the carbohydrate consumption was not terribly high. You know, you would get a lot of green leafy vegetables, a lot of meats, you'd get some tubers and those kind of things, which would be your starch. But grains were not real common until, you know, a couple hundred years ago for most, well, I mean, a couple thousand years ago in Asia. And then, you know, then other populations eventually became agricultural as well. But grains have not been a big part of human existence. So anyway, so there's some argument that carbohydrates are slightly less essential to our body than these other nutrients that are in the vegetables and the proteins and the fats. Okay, so this is kind of that same slide again, just showing that we want to stay in that healthy range. And we want to do that because we want to optimize our insulin levels. And one of the things that we're going to talk about on the next slide is why it matters your insulin level when we're talking. So one of the titles of part of the title of this presentation was weight gain. So there are people in our age bracket that would like to lose some weight, including myself. I would like to lose some weight. And interestingly enough, one of the things that's really important to know about insulin is that insulin is actually a fat storage hormone. Its job is to take that extra blood sugar and stick it into fat storage. But when it does that, it kind of like puts up a wall around the fat and says, no, that's storage. We want to keep that in storage. And so as long as insulin levels are high, your body has a difficult time accessing that fat and using it for energy. So if you're wanting to lose weight, part of your strategy is best served if you are also managing your insulin levels. In other words, you want to keep your blood sugar managed so that you're managing your insulin so that your body can get at that fat. So if your insulin levels are low, it's not fighting you and keeping you from taking that fat and using it for energy. So does that kind of make sense? It takes a couple steps to think about, but keep your blood sugar in that normal range. It keeps your insulin in a normal range, which then allows you to access the fat because the insulin is not playing its game of saying, no, you can't have this fat. So just think of insulin as a fat storage hormone in addition to the other things it does. So that's kind of an interesting way to think about it as you're thinking about weight loss. So when we talk about insulin resistance, that's a little bit, you know, a lot of us, when we reach, I'm overweight, and I know that I consider myself insulin resistant because I'm more challenged with all of these things we're talking about than somebody younger than me. I struggle more with losing weight. I struggle more with craving carbohydrates. I struggle more with inflammation, all these things that we've been talking about. And I think those are symptoms of insulin resistance, even though I'm not yet diabetic and I may be borderline pre-diabetic. I'm still considering myself on the road to this insulin resistance because I'm starting to have a lot of these symptoms, if that makes any sense at all. So insulin resistance comes along with weight gain, cravings, hunger, fatigue, brain fog. All of these things are symptoms, if you will, that our insulin is being elevated because we've spent lots of years eating a little too much carbohydrates. So our insulin has gotten a little bit less functional and a little bit less sensitive than it used to be. So sugar is staying outside of the cells, not getting in the cells where it should. And your blood sugar stays just a little bit higher than it used to, you know. And because of that, let's just think about the brain cells. You got that brain cell, it's wanting some sugar to create energy, to do its thinking. If the sugar can't quite get in that cell the way it used to, if that insulin's just a little bit resistant and not doing its job of getting that sugar in, that cell is a little bit starved for food. So therefore, you get brain fog. You get a little bit of dysfunction in the brain because you're, even though you've got plenty of sugar floating around in the bloodstream, it's just not quite getting into the cells where it should. Um, the good news is that as you improve these through some of these strategies, it actually does ultimately improve that insulin resistance and getting into the cells. But the other thing, it also, by keeping your insulin low and allowing your body to use fat for energy, the fat and the ketones and some of the other things that your body can use for energy uh, are the usage of those things are improved. So you're giving yourself two bonuses. You're helping your body get um, less inflammation and all those other things, but you're also helping get other energy sources into your cells so they can think and detox and do all the things that cells do. I hope that wasn't too much information, you guys. Please tell me if I've gone too far and made you crazy. You can go, stop, you're making me crazy. Yes.
There is a quick question, and I think rather we might want to take it now rather than later, because it relates to the plate and the food. Um, can you provide an example of a daily intake of food that would create proper insulin levels, protein, fat, fiber, and what the adequate levels are? And I know we've done the plate before, so
Right.
more specific, maybe you can give an example if it won't take too long in the middle of what you're
Oh,
doing here.
I'm going to grab a picture that I think will be helpful. Okay, so I think, can you all see that picture pretty well? Or is it,
Not
I'd
the
have to,
detail, but we can see the picture.
you know what, I can stop sharing for 2 seconds and show you the picture. There, is that better?
Yeah.
Can you see
Yeah.
that, Jack? Okay, so
Yes.
this is how we recommend people eat. So half of your plate vegetables, and if you focus particularly on the low carb vegetables, leafy greens and summer squashes and things that are not real high in carbs, then you're going to get a lot of fiber, a lot of nutrients, a lot of phytonutrients if you focus on that. And then about a quarter of your plate protein, about a palm size. And then notice it says a little, I think it's this one, little healthy fat with every meal. And then carbohydrates are actually, oh, I'm putting the wrong one, healthy fat with every meal, little bit of carbohydrates, and that's optional. You know, the level of carbohydrates depends on your ability to manage carbs. And then fruit is actually rather small in here too. It's not, you'll find some people, especially this time of year when fruit's so wonderful, will eat, a whole plate full of fruit and very little protein or vegetables. And even though fruit's very nutritious, it also can be a blood sugar source, an excess blood sugar source. Anyway, this is what, if you kind of follow this strategy for your snacks and your meals, what you're doing is you're being sure that you're getting that fat, fiber, and protein, and you're not exceeding with carbohydrates. Um, as far as actual quantities of carbohydrates, everybody's different. If you're an athlete, you can get away with a lot more carbs than someone who's a little more sedentary. Um, Generally speaking, and there's some newer literature out that says, in the 100 to 150 grams of carbohydrates a day works for a lot of people. If you're already type 2 diabetic, you might have to go a little bit lower. If you're young and athletic, you could go a little higher. I found for myself, if I stick around 100 to 120 grams of carbohydrates a day, I lose weight, my inflammation goes down, I feel a lot better. And there's some really nifty tracking applications if you're techie, to follow your carbohydrate intake. And one of them I really like, I'll just put a plug. I'm actually going to type it into the chat. It's called Chronometer.com. And there's an app you can get on your phone too. There's also MyFitnessPal, but Chronometer is a little bit better as a way to track your vitamins, minerals, fibers, protein. It's kind of nifty to see what you're actually eating every day. Anyway, let me get back to my screen here.
Just quick interruption. For those of you who had a little trouble reading that, if you watch the recording, which is done in speaker view, it will be full screen. So you'll be able to see that piece of paper a lot better if you need to review that when we send out the recording.
Okay. Thanks,
Sorry.
Jim. All right, so what causes insulin resistance? Obviously, a diet high in refined carbs. If we spend a lot of our life eating too much sweets, over time, our poor little pancreas and our body just gets a little out of balance. Chronic inflammation, which can be caused by stress and, sometimes diseases, about a variety of different things can be a contributor to insulin resistance. Lack of physical exercise. You guys have probably heard this, that sitting is the new smoking. So too much sitting, so physical exercise actually will bring down blood sugar. There's actually some really cool studies that show that if you walk within, I think it's within an hour after a meal, you'll bring your blood sugar way down. So even if you ate that big plate of spaghetti because your mom made it and it was delicious, if you get out and walk, it's going to take that peak and bring it down. So exercise is very critical for managing blood sugar. Stress and cortisol, I think we've talked about that quite a bit. Interesting, one of the things, this was when I reread this presentation to get ready for you guys, I kind of had forgotten about pesticides. And there's actually some early evidence that certain kinds of pesticides actually are leading to insulin resistance, which is kind of a scary thought, isn't it? So as you're able, manage your pesticide consumption by eating organic as your budget allows. Okay. All right, so muscles, this is a little bit why exercise matters. Your muscles actually store a type of sugar. Oh gosh, I'm having a senior moment. Not glycogen. Is it glycogen? Yeah, glycogen. Stores it in the muscles, and that way your muscles are ready to do their thing. So the more you exercise, the more your body's going to use up that blood sugar. So that's part of why if you walk within 30 minutes of eating, you're going to bring that blood sugar down, because your body's using up that glucose in your muscles. Your muscles use a lot of glucose. Other places that your body's going to store that extra sugar is in the liver. So non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is really on the rise. Just about that same chart I showed you early on about obesity, it almost looks identical to that. Now that people are eating so many carbs, sadly, fatty liver disease is on the rise also. How's that for gloom and doom, guys? Sorry. So fat cells become the primary storage for that extra glucose, as we talked about. So when you see people that have a lot of weight around the middle, sometimes it's due to high stress levels, causing them to have high insulin levels, which is causing them to kind of store that fat right around the middle. So that's kind of what we call cortisol fat, which a lot of us have these days, I'm sad to say. So just a little more gloom and doom, I'm afraid, leading to inflammation and cardiovascular disease. We kind of talked about that earlier, that these elevated blood sugars, elevated cortisols, they do ultimately lead to inflammation and some tissue damage if we don't manage them. Okay, so this is kind of what that same chart looks like if we're insulin resistant. So what happens is we eat that high carb meal that's not got the fat or the protein or the fiber to kind of mitigate that spike. But then because our body is insulin resistant, our blood sugar never completely gets down to normal. And our cells then become starved for sugar because the sugar is not getting in. So we crave more sugar or more carbohydrates. So we get on these loops that are really hard to break. We want more carbs because our cells are starving. So those of us that are insulin resistant, we have a harder time resisting the cravings for carbohydrates. Hence, so the good news is, really it's only a couple days of challenge to get on a good habit of eating kind of the way I showed you on that meal wheel, where you focus on the protein, fat, and fiber and lower amounts of carbohydrates. It only takes a couple days of eating like that so your body gets off this roller coaster and your blood blood levels kind of get more in this normal range, so you stop having these crazy cravings all the time. So one of the things I wanted to mention, oh, goodness, as we talk about cravings, there's, interestingly enough, sorry guys, I just knocked my mouse off again. I think I did this the last time we were talking. I caught it with my foot. So cinnamon, and it doesn't have to be in a pill. It can just be cinnamon you put on your oatmeal or in your coffee. Cinnamon is interesting because it helps reduce cravings. So if you're deciding you're wanting to go on this sort of more moderate carb adventure, cinnamon can be kind of your friend. It helps manage blood sugar, but it also reduces cravings. So even just like I say, the flavor of cinnamon on your food, you can take it as a capsule, a variety of different ways. Now let's see, I'm kind of talking too long, so I'm going to go a little bit quicker. So we talked about insulin and blood sugar leading to leading to early aging. There's actually these proteins that bind to sugar called advanced glycation end products, or AGEs, that actually contribute to aging and speed up. We talked about a lot during that health span class, contribute to wrinkling and all those other things. Again, complications of all this fun stuff is can be cardiovascular disease, liver diseases, kidney diseases, all kinds of unpleasant things. Okay, I think I kind of hit most of these. Eye health, kidney health, skin, nerves, hearing, all of these things are kind of a result of that inflammation, but also the ages and the damage caused by those elevated blood sugar and insulin. Okay, so this is just a different image of that same meal wheel. Half your plate veggies and low sugar fruits, a little bit of healthy fat, protein, and then supplements as you need them. And then off to the side, it's saying these are moderation foods, your starches, your alcohol and sweets. So this basically is what I said earlier. Okay, this is a fun little test if you want to do it. You chew on a saltine cracker and that you actually time how soon it takes for you to taste sweet, and it gives you an indication of how quickly your body breaks down carbohydrates. So you time it for up to 30 seconds. And if you taste sweet within the first, I believe it's the first 10 seconds, then your body is a fast, it digests carbs quickly. If it takes up to 30 seconds, then your body digests carbs slower, which would indicate how, those spikes in the blood sugar. Some of us, but there's other ways you can monitor. You don't have to use the cracker test as an indicator of how to determine your carb levels. One way that if you don't have a continuous glucose monitor, or you don't want to stick your finger, one of the ways that you can check and see how you're doing with your blood sugars is just see how you feel. Okay, let's say you eat that bowl of pasta and an hour later you're getting draggy, you got brain fog, and you're craving that piece of chocolate cake. Well, likely that pasta was too much for you. So next time you have pasta, put more vegetables in there or eat less pasta. See how you feel an hour later. And so you use those markers of brain fog and fatigue and craving. Uh, it's not as scientific as monitoring your blood sugar, but they're pretty good indicators. If you're feeling foggy or if you're craving that big piece of chocolate cake after a meal, then there's a pretty good chance that what you had for that meal was more carbohydrates than your body needs. I think that maybe is a better answer to your question earlier, and I probably should have said that. Okay, just a quick plug for healthy choices. Natural Grocers has real high standards on their meats. We don't carry anything that's not humanely raised and pasture raised if it's a pasture raised animal. Even our chickens are required to be cage free. Dairy is required at least 120 days on pasture. And part of the reason is it makes a difference in the fats that the animal produces. It makes a difference in the inflammation your body experiences after you eat those foods. Just a lot of important things. And not everybody's going to be a meat eater. I'm sure there's some vegans out there. Lawrence has a lot of vegan eaters. And this is not at all to diss one or favor the other. I'm just suggesting if you are a meat eater, as your budget allows, it's a little healthier on your body to have the food the way nature intended it, like cows that eat grass instead of animal byproducts and things. Healthy fats. This is a list of some healthy fats that you might want to consider. Could be just the fat that's in your meat that you're eating. You don't have to necessarily add fat each time. Could be the olive oil on your salad dressing. Could be the fat that's in your dairy. You don't necessarily. This isn't. I'm not saying eat a stick of butter with every meal. I'm just saying that a little healthy fat's going to help you feel more satisfied. It's going to support your brain and heart health, and it's going to ultimately help you with that blood sugar balance. Anyway, again, pasture raised. Let's see. Oh, and I'm coming. Let me see how many more slides I got here. Yeah, we've got a few slides on supplements that support healthy blood sugar, and then so I'll scurry through those really quick. All right, saturated fats. I could talk for a while on this, so I'll just kind of quickly say saturated fats, like a lot of other things, are not quite as bad as we're led to believe. Obviously, again, I don't want you eating a stick of butter, but a little bit of butter actually supports brain and heart health and gut health, believe it or not. So everything in moderation, but saturated fats do have some benefit for the body if you're not struggling with your bile production. Fruits, berries are our suggested fruit for most people because they're lower in sugar and higher in those phytonutrients, especially the bright colored berries, blueberries and blackberries. So if somebody is struggling with sugar, I'd steer them toward these lower sugar options, the berries and the avocados and things. Okay, so a healthy breakfast can look like a protein source like in eggs or something like that, tofu if you're a vegan, vegetables, cheese offers protein and fat. Not everybody eats dairy, and a little bit of fruit here. So this kind of gives you a sense of how it's kind of balanced. Notice it's not just terribly high in carbohydrates. It's kind of just on the low end of so if you're aiming for 100 grams of carbs a day, you get roughly 30 per meal, then you're kind of on track. Okay, artificial sweeteners. Turns out that sweet taste, even if it doesn't give you any calories, stimulates your insulin response. Your body thinks it's eating sweets, so it actually pumps out a little insulin anyway. So, and there are some, especially the artificial sweeteners. I'm not talking about stevia or the sugar alcohols like erythritol or xylitol. This is the sucralose and aspartame and those kind of things they actually can be kind of harmful to the body. Okay, so just a quick summary of avoid the higher glycemic index foods, exercise caution. So these are moderation foods, your high glycemic fruits and vegetables, and your lower fat dairy. And then things that you really should avoid, processed foods, a lot of the omega-3 fats, that's corn oils and things that stimulate inflammation, and artificial sweeteners. Okay, so strategies for success. If you want to go on this type of diet for weight management or for health span, as we talked about a couple months ago, planning is going to be your ticket. Being ready, being when you're stressed, when you're tired. My worst time is when I am really tired and I come home from work and I'm going to have that ice cream. You just better get out of that refrigerator door. So planning and having on hand some peanut butter or cheese or something that's going to give me that creamy taste and satisfy me before I grab that ice cream and eat the whole pint. I may have a bite or two, but if I've done something to kind of satisfy myself first, I've planned, I've kind of slowed that reactive eating down by giving myself some protein or some fat. Okay, other tricks, apple cider vinegar, resistant starch. I'm going to just leave this. If you have questions, let me know. Quickly, some supplements that support healthy blood sugar: fish oil, magnesium, vitamin D, chromium, milk thistle, N-acetylcysteine, biotin, alpha lipoic acid, vitamin C, green tea. I could talk a long time about all of these, so I'm just going to really scurry quickly. Fish oil is great for reducing inflammation, but it's also been shown to help insulin have its work better. Vitamin D also improves insulin function. It helps manage inflammation, and it actually works with the pancreas. There's actually vitamin D receptors in the pancreas, so your body needs that vitamin D to help manage blood sugar. So if you're not in the sun a lot, you might consider supplementing with vitamin D. Chromium and magnesium, they're two minerals. They play a big role in blood sugars. Chromium is a very important one if you already know you're diabetic or insulin resistant. I grabbed this. This is one of my favorite products on the shelf. It's actually a multivitamin called True Balance. It's high in biotin. It's high in chromium. It's got some magnesium in it. It's got a good amount of B vitamins for stress. So I am not diabetic, as I said. But I feel perfectly, I'm not going to become diabetic because I'm taking a diabetic support multi. It just helps my body manage its blood sugar. And this is actually 2 months supply for about $25. So probably one of my better priced multivitamins too. Okay, where else? Lifestyle. You want to get plenty of sleep so your body's not stressed. You want to exercise the best that you're able. And you want to manage your carbs within your body's ability and within your budget's ability. If you want, guys, just remember that coaching sessions are free. If you're really struggling, I'm very happy to sit down with you and work out a plan, a strategy. How do I manage this sort of thing? Resources, I've got just a lot of other things that I have not attached to these slides. If you want more information, you can send me an email and I can send you some more information. And then if you've got a fancy phone, you can scan that and it'll take you to right where you can request a coaching session. I'll leave that up for 2 seconds and then I'll stop sharing my screen. And I see this.
There's 3 questions that have been added, and I'd like to get to them because I think they're good questions and maybe you can get a quick answer. I know we're running low on time. Once a body becomes insulin resistant, can it be reversed with the change? With the change in diet, or is it just always going to be something you have to manage?
I think the science is a little bit unsure on that. I think it would take a while to be completely free of being insulin resistant. You'd have to, years before you'd be perfectly free of that. But it does improve slowly, and the reactions associated with being insulin resistant are greatly reduced by improving your diet. So as I said, by managing your carbs, your body starts using fat for energy. So your cells start having energy. So your brain starts working better, and your body starts losing weight. And so a lot of the things that are negative about being insulin resistant are improved by the dietary changes. So
Okay. Also, how much is too much cinnamon? Is there a limit? And there are a lot of types of cinnamon. Is there a preference of type of cinnamon?
yes, that's a good question. So I think it's the Vietnamese cinnamon. There is like a maximum amount. I think they recommend about 1 teaspoon limit per day, and there's something in there that's a little bit harder on the liver. The one that's recommended for blood sugar is the Ceylon cinnamon, CEYL. Oh, let me stop sharing. Sorry. CEYLON cinnamon is the one that's recommended for blood sugar, and it's also a little safer quantity wise.
Yeah. If as a cook, I will tell you, sometimes you'll see that as just under Indian cinnamon or cinnamon from India. Also, cinnamon China, I think, falls in the same category. The Vietnamese one is the one that's the strongest cinnamon. The other question, well, was more of a statement, uh, and it's basically about portions and eating order. And I know some diets because I've seen those where obviously portions are important, but
Right.
what you eat first to fill up. So maybe there's what's left on your plate, so to speak.
Yes.
If you want to address that, she has a particular problem with avocado and what would make it taste better, and that's I think a matter of taste of what you want to add. Stick it in a sandwich with something else and just put a little in it.
There you go. Yeah, avocado is essential for everybody, but it's a really nice, nutritious thing. So there's actually a book. I was looking to find it, but I'm afraid I've got it somewhere else. That talks exactly about that, about the order in which you eat your food does matter. To really summarize it quickly, eat your carbohydrates last. You have your fiber and your protein in your gut, and if you eat your carbs last, this book, The Glucose Revolution, that I was going to show you, she actually shows blood sugar analysis depending on the order that you eat your food, and it really does make a difference, the order in which you eat them. So carbs last, I guess, is the really quick version. Did that answer the question, Jack?
It looks like it. I think so. And like I said, solving a taste problem is kind of a matter of trying it stuff. But you can put it in salads, you can put it in lots of things, and hide it with other foods, I guess. I would recommend it on a PLT, but I'm not supposed to be recommending bacon. So,
For me, a little salt makes a big difference in the avocado. I really like
yeah.
it. That
Or
really helps.
sometimes a flavorful oil on it might make it taste, a little olive oil or sunflower oil may make it taste more palatable to you, isn't it? I happen to love avocado, so I'm a bad person for that.
I've got a recipe that I give out a lot that's a pudding that uses avocado as the thickener or and you can't even hardly taste the avocado, and it uses banana for the sweetener. So it's a little bit of maple syrup, banana, avocado, chocolate, and I think coconut milk or I think it's coconut milk, and you blend that and you've got pudding. So you can sneak it in chocolate. How's that sound?
There you go. I think we're getting to the time period, so I know we kind of rushed at the end, but once again, we can go over this in the slides when we send out the recording of this. Also, I think